A desperate mom, a burned-down mansion, and a shocking discovery buried beneath decades of ash. When Evelyn Carter spent her last $10,000 on a fire-damaged estate everyone else had abandoned, people called her crazy. But what she found inside changed her life and the lives of countless others. Hidden rooms, forgotten letters, priceless artifacts. This isn't just a story about rebuilding a house. It's about rebuilding a soul. Stay with us because by the end of this video, you won't just believe in second chances. You'll want to find your own. Let's get started. Evelyn Carter hadn't slept through the night in over a year. Since her husband, Mason, passed away from a heart attack in the middle of a snowstorm, the house had felt too quiet, too cold. It wasn't just the silence that kept her up. It was the stack of unpaid bills, the foreclosure letters, and the weight of being the only parent left for her 2 children. At 47, Evelyn wore her grief like a second skin. Once a respected interior designer in Charleston, South Carolina, now she was scraping by, cleaning vacation rentals, and praying the car would last another winter. One bleak January morning, unable to bear the suffocating quiet. She bundled herself in her late husband's flannel jacket and drove aimlessly until a charred structure caught her eye. The mansion was massive, burned and blackened from a fire that had gutted the top floor. A faded "for sale" sign leaned crooked in the snow. She should have kept driving, but something about it, maybe the stillness, maybe the sorrow felt familiar. Evelyn pulled over, stepped out, and stared at the ruined home as if it were calling her. She had no plan, no experience flipping houses, just $12,000 to her name. But she whispered, "What if this is the thing that saves us?" The realtor looked at Evelyn like she was crazy. "You want to buy the Hamilton estate?" he asked, glancing up from a stack of papers, his expression tight with confusion. "You do know it caught fire last summer." "Right. It's practically condemned." Evelyn nodded, clutching her fingers around the thermos of gas station coffee she hadn't touched. "I know," she whispered, "but I'd like to see it anyway." The man sighed and tossed her a set of keys. "You're the only one who's asked. Knock yourself out." The mansion stood like a ghost of itself. Charcoal streaks ran down its white columns. The second-floor windows were blown out, some still boarded. The iron gate screeched as Evelyn pushed through, boots crunching on brittle snow. Inside, the smell of smoke lingered like an old wound. The grand staircase was scorched, the railing half collapsed. Ash coated the marble floors, wallpaper curled from water damage. The fireplace in the front parlor was cracked, but oddly elegant in its ruin. Blackened books still lined the shelves. It was tragic, forgotten, and somehow beautiful. Evelyn stood in the center of what used to be a ballroom and closed her eyes. She could hear the music that once played there. Laughter, dancing, life. Her heart thudded painfully. She opened her eyes and whispered aloud, as if to Mason, "Do you see it?" 2. The next morning, she took every last cent of her savings, $12,478, and bought the burned mansion for $900. The realtor shook her hand in disbelief. "You know the place is a money pit, right? The fire insurance claim was never followed up. It's all as is." "I'm not afraid of broken things," Evelyn replied softly. "I've lived inside one for the last year." That night, she broke the news to her children. Ryan, 17, stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "You spent everything we had on a burned house." "I spent everything," Evelyn said calmly. "On hope?" "Layla." 418 said nothing at first. But later, while helping her mom unpack a box of supplies, she whispered, "It's kind of romantic, in a weird way." Evelyn smiled. "That house has stories. I can feel them." The next weeks were brutal. Evelyn worked her cleaning jobs during the day and drove out to the mansion every evening. It had no heat, no running water, no lights. She hauled in lamps, space heaters, tools from Mason's old workshop. She scraped soot off walls, bagged up debris, tore up ruined carpet with her bare hands. One night, while cleaning the library, she knocked over a scorched bookcase. It landed with a thud, kicking up a cloud of ash and something else. A small trapdoor, hidden behind where the shelves had been. The wood was charred, but intact. Heart hammering, Evelyn pulled it open. Inside was a narrow staircase leading downward into darkness. She hesitated, then grabbed her flashlight and descended. The air was cold, dry. At the bottom, a thick wooden door stood closed. It creaked open on rusted hinges. Behind it, a room, untouched by fire. Stone walls lined with shelving, furniture covered in white sheets, boxes, a cedar trunk, a faint smell of lavender. Evelyn's breath caught. The fire hadn't reached this far. This wasn't just a basement. It was a hidden sanctuary. She stepped forward, heart in her throat, pulling the sheet from a small table. Dust billowed. On it sat a leather-bound notebook and a ceramic cup, still holding dried lavender stems. The notebook had a name pressed in gold on the cover: Clara Hamilton. With trembling hands, Evelyn opened it. The first page read, "If you're reading this, then you found the place I ran to when the world outside got too loud. This house has burned before physically and metaphorically. But there is always something worth saving. Always." Evelyn blinked hard, heart twisting. A woman decades ago had found peace here, in this very house. Despite the darkness above, she kept reading. Page after page of handwritten thoughts, letters, poems, stories of sorrow and also of survival. Clara had lost her son in Vietnam, her husband to cancer. She, too, had once been a widow, rebuilding something from ash. The entry that broke Evelyn was dated 1976. "I keep this room untouched, my private chapel. One day, someone might find it and wonder who I was. If that person is hurting, please know, there is life after loss, beauty after ruin. You just have to look close enough." Evelyn sank to her knees. That night, she didn't cry from grief. She cried from recognition. Someone had walked this road before, had suffered, and somehow had turned that suffering into grace. This wasn't just a burned mansion. It was a legacy. It started with a cold draft. Evelyn had returned the next morning with a notebook, gloves, and thermos of tea. The hidden room below the library had become her refuge, quiet, untouched, sacred. She spent hours there, reading Clara Hamilton's journal, gently uncovering the keepsakes left behind: pressed flowers, old music sheets, a black and white photo of Clara and her husband dancing barefoot on what looked like the very ballroom floor above. But as she stood to stretch her legs, she felt it a subtle shift in the air, a cool breath like someone had exhaled near her shoulder. She turned quickly. Nothing. Just shadows dancing against the stone walls. "Get a grip," she muttered, shaking off the chill. But the draft came again, this time from beneath the floor, following instinct more than logic. Evelyn stepped back into the center of the room, knelt down, and knocked on the stone tiles. Most gave a solid thud, but near the trunk a hollow tap. She leaned in, fingers working along the seam, brushing away dust and dried leaves. And there it was, nearly invisible. A square panel with a small iron ring in the center. She hesitated only a second before pulling. It opened. The smell hit her first earthy, like time itself had been sealed inside. She clicked on her flashlight and peered in. A crawl space. No, not quite. It was deeper than that. Narrow stone stairs led downward into another chamber. A second basement. "Clara," she whispered, "what were you hiding down here?" With the flashlight trembling in her grip, Evelyn descended. The room below was smaller, maybe 12 by 12 feet, but what it held made her gasp. Wooden crates, stacked neatly. Dozens of them, each marked with the same hand-painted initials, C.H.H. She opened the nearest one. Books, leather-bound, some with gold lettering. First editions dated as far back as 1800s. The second crate held something stranger fine china wrapped in yellowed newspaper from 1963. Teacups, plates, silver serving trays. The third, bundles of letters, bound in silk ribbons, some addressed to Captain Jonathan Hamilton, others to my beloved Clara. Dozens of them. It was a private archive. But what caught Evelyn's breath was the object resting atop the fourth crate, a jewelry box, lacquered wood with a delicate lock. She lifted it carefully and flipped the latch. Inside was a string of pearls, a sapphire ring, and an envelope. The ink was faded, but legible. To the one who finds this, these are not just objects. They are the final pieces of a life built on love, sacrifice, and survival. I did not hide them out of greed, but out of fear that they would be discarded without meaning. If you are reading this, please honor them as I have. Clara H. Evelyn pressed a hand to her chest. She felt like she was intruding, and yet welcomed. Suddenly, the weight of what she had discovered hit her like a wave. This wasn't just history. It was someone's entire life, packed into a forgotten underground tomb. And no one had claimed it. No one had even known it existed. Later that night, Evelyn sat at her dining table. Clara's letters spread out before her. She hadn't told Ryan or Layla yet. How could she explain this? That beneath the ashes of someone else's ruin, she had found a buried world. And yet, it wasn't just about the monetary value, though she suspected the jewelry and books might be worth something substantial. It was deeper than that. It felt like Clara had left it for her, as if two women, generations apart, had reached through the void and clasped hands in silent understanding. That night, she called her daughter into the living room. "Layla, come here. I want to show you something." They sat cross-legged on the rug, the jewelry box between them. Layla opened it, eyes wide. "Is this real?" Evelyn nodded. "I think it belonged to the woman who once lived in that house. Her name was Clara." She handed Layla one of the letters. As her daughter read, Evelyn watched the girl's expression soften. Something changed. "Mom, why didn't her family come back for this?" "I don't know," Evelyn replied. "Maybe they were gone. Maybe they forgot. Maybe no one even knew it existed." Layla ran a finger along the edge of the envelope. "You didn't just find treasure, did you?" "No," Evelyn said quietly. "I found her story." The next morning, Evelyn made a decision. She would research Clara Hamilton everything she could find. If Clara had descendants, she'd reach out. But if not, she would protect her legacy. This house had chosen her, not because she was strong, but because she needed to become strong, and somehow, so did Clara. The following days moved differently, like time was folding inward. Evelyn no longer dreaded waking up. Each morning, she poured her coffee, tied her hair into a loose bun, slipped on Mason's old work coat, and drove out to the mansion with a toolbox in one hand and Clara's journal in the other. She no longer saw the broken windows or charred beams as obstacles. She saw layers, each scar on the house, telling a different part of its history. And strangely, As she scrubbed the soot off marble columns or patched up walls with her own hands, it felt like she was rebuilding more than just a structure. She was rebuilding herself. One afternoon, while cleaning soot from the front parlor, Evelyn paused to look at her reflection in the cracked mirror above the fireplace. For the first time in over a year, she didn't see a woman drowning. Her face was still lined with grief. Her eyes still carried the weight of loss, but there was something new now. Resolve. That same day, she found a second box of letters, tucked behind the piano. Clara had addressed them to herself, raw, honest, aching. In one, she'd written, "The world expects me to grieve quietly, to wear black, keep my chin high, and not make a fuss. But inside, I'm screaming. The silence is louder than the loss." Evelyn's breath hitched. She felt seen. It had been months since Mason's funeral. Months since people had stopped saying his name, stopped bringing casseroles, stopped asking how she was holding up. Grief, it turned out, had an expiration date for everyone but the one carrying it. Clara had known that too, and in some way she had left a map. That night, Evelyn sat with her son Ryan in the garage, where he was attempting to fix the broken lawnmower. He hadn't asked about the mansion in days, but his walls were thinner now, softer. She handed him one of Clara's wartime letters. He read it in silence. "Who wrote this?" he asked. "Clara Hamilton, the woman who lived in the house before the fire. She write all this by hand." "Every word," Evelyn said, a smile in her voice. She lost her son in the Vietnam War, and then her husband not long after. Ryan looked down. "That's heavy." "She kept writing anyway." She replied. She didn't stop loving, or hoping, or trying. Ryan looked up, eyes meeting his mother's. "Kind of like you." The words caught her off guard. She didn't cry. She just reached out and gently squeezed his arm. The next day, Evelyn returned to the hidden room beneath the library and began what she called the inventory of grace. She cataloged everything: books, letters, china, the jewelry, the war medals, not with the intent to sell, but to understand. She wasn't hoarding value. She was protecting meaning. And in doing so, she realized something she had value, too. For too long, she had believed her usefulness died with Mason. She was no longer a designer, no longer a wife, just a woman trying to keep the lights on. But Clara's story taught her that we don't stop being who we are when life knocks us down. We just forget, and sometimes it takes ruins to remind us. She remembered how she used to see beauty in the forgotten. How, as a young designer, she'd walk into abandoned buildings and imagine what they could become. Somewhere along the way, she stopped doing that for herself. Until now, one morning, while sorting through a crate of Clara's old sheet music, Evelyn found a handwritten note. "The walls may fall, the roof may burn, but love never leaves. It lingers in the corners. It hums in forgotten songs. It waits to be remembered." Evelyn pressed the note to her heart. She now understood that this house wasn't just a project. It was a calling, a symbol of everything broken that could still be made beautiful again. The fire had tried to erase Clara's story, but Evelyn wouldn't let that happen. And maybe, just maybe, in saving Clara's legacy, she was writing her own. The knock at her door came early Saturday morning. Evelyn, still in her flannel pajamas, opened it to find a woman about her age holding a thermos and a clipboard. "Hi there," the stranger said, smiling warmly. "Sorry to drop by unannounced. I'm Ava Monroe, with the Historical Society of Charleston. Are you the new owner of the Hamilton estate?" Evelyn blinked. I am." Ava extended the thermos. "Coffee. Figured you'd need it." Evelyn accepted it, puzzled but intrigued. "How did you know?" Ava chuckled. Your name's been floating through our office ever since the sale went public. Nobody's touched that property in decades. And after the fire, well, we thought it'd be torn down. But then we heard someone bought it. Cash, no contractors, no permits, just showing up every day and doing the work herself. Evelyn flushed slightly. I wasn't expecting visitors. You're a bit of a legend. Ava grinned. Mind if I ask you a few questions? Within the hour, Evelyn was walking Ava through the mansion, pointing out which rooms she'd cleared, where she'd started restoring the floors, and how she'd discovered the hidden stairwell beneath the library. When she mentioned the secret basement, Ava's eyes lit up. Wait, you found the Hamilton archives? Evelyn raised a brow. You knew they existed. We'd hoped. Ava whispered. There were rumors. But no one had seen anything firsthand since Clara Hamilton passed in the 80s. The family estate went into probate, and the property sat idle. We thought all her letters and personal artifacts were lost in the fire. They weren't, Evelyn said softly. They're safe. Ava stared at her. You have no idea what that means to local historians. Evelyn wasn't sure what to say. She hadn't done this for praise. She hadn't even realized how important the letters, photos, and trinkets truly were to anyone but Clara. But now, her hands had preserved a legacy. That night, Ava emailed her an official request would Evelyn consider allowing the Historical Society to partner with her to document the estate's artifacts, with the potential to display select pieces in an upcoming exhibit titled Southern Voices Untold Heroines of the Lowcountry. Evelyn reread the message twice before calling her daughter. Layla answered sleepily. Mom, guess what? They want Clara's story. They want her letters, her music, her jewelry, everything we found. They think she deserves to be remembered. Layla was quiet. Then whispered, You always said that house had a soul. Turns out, Evelyn replied, so did she. But something deeper stirred beneath the excitement, something personal. If Clara's story could be honored, could Evelyn's? Later that week, Evelyn was invited to speak on a local podcast hosted by a women's resilience collective. Ava had recommended her. The host, a soft-voiced woman named Marla, asked gently, What made you buy a burned-down mansion with your last $10,000? Evelyn hesitated, then spoke from the heart. Because I had nothing left to lose. She said, I was broke. I was broken. But when I stood in front of that house, I saw myself, blackened, hollowed, but still standing. The episode went viral in local circles. Messages poured in. Women thanking her for reminding them that it's never too late. That even in ashes, there can be seeds. One message stood out. A woman named Georgia wrote, I was going to sell my grandmother's house for scrap, but you made me walk through it one more time. I found her love letters in the attic. I cried for an hour, thank you. And just like that, Evelyn's story had become a spark. Then came the email from an antiques dealer. They'd heard about the Hamilton archives and asked to appraise some of the jewelry and books. Evelyn agreed, cautiously. The appraisal stunned her. The sapphire ring alone could fetch $7,000. The first edition poetry books. Some were worth over $1, $200 each. Even the china, well preserved and with original stamps, held substantial value. But it was the dealer's last remark that lingered. You know, he said, if you documented this whole process, what you found, what you restored, you could build a business around it. People love stories, and yours, it's better than fiction. That night, Evelyn sat at her kitchen table surrounded by notebooks, photos, and receipts. She thought about the first day she stepped into the mansion. The silence, the fear, the risk. She looked around her modest kitchen, the same one where the heater had once stopped working, where she had once cried in the dark, wondering how she'd feed her kids. Now, there was light. There was heat. There was purpose. She opened a fresh journal. On the first page, she wrote, "Second chances are never obvious. They show up looking like disasters. But inside the wreckage, there's always a key. And sometimes, the person you save is yourself." By spring, the mansion had changed. Not just in its structure. Though Evelyn had made incredible progress, new windows on the first floor, smoke-damaged walls scrubbed clean, and even a restored chandelier that now glowed softly in the front parlor. But it was Evelyn herself who had changed most. She moved differently now, shoulders straight, eyes bright. There was a new steadiness in her voice when she spoke to Ryan and Layla. Even the way she held her coffee mug confident, grounded, felt like a woman reborn. Every corner of the house seemed to echo her transformation. And yet, she never expected what happened that Sunday morning. It started with a letter. Not an email, not a phone call. A real letter. In a pale blue envelope with slightly shaky handwriting. It arrived tucked between utility bills and junk mail. She almost missed it. She opened it, standing at the kitchen counter. "Dear Ms. Carter, my name is Madeline Prescott. I'm the granddaughter of Clara Hamilton. Someone sent me an article about your restoration of the estate. At first, I didn't believe it. I thought the place had burned beyond saving. But then I saw your photo. You were holding one of my grandmother's journals, and I knew that house, it was her soul, and I thought it was gone forever. Would it be possible for me to visit, even just to see it one last time? With gratitude, Madeline." Evelyn's hands shook. Clara had family. Someone still remembered her. She placed the letter down gently, like it was something sacred. That night, she couldn't sleep. The questions gnawed at her. Why hadn't they come back for Clara's belongings? Why did no one stop the house from falling into ruin? And when Madeline arrived 3 days later, those questions got answers Evelyn never expected. Madeline Prescott was in her 60s, dressed in a navy coat and white gloves. Her hair, pinned back neatly, was almost the exact silver as Clara's in the old photographs. When Evelyn opened the front door, Madeline froze. Her eyes filled instantly. "I never thought I'd stand here again," she whispered. "I was 11 the last time." They walked the house slowly, in silence. Evelyn pointed out restored sections, showed her the library, the staircase she rebuilt, and finally led her to the basement, the sanctuary. Madeline stood in the center of the stone room and began to cry. "My grandmother used to bring me down here when she was sad. She said she'd light a candle and say, 'This is where I remember who I am.'" Evelyn quietly handed her Clara's favorite journal. Madeline pressed it to her chest. "Why did no one come for her things?" Evelyn finally asked, unable to hold it in. Madeline looked away. "I tried. After she passed. I asked about the house, about her belongings, but my mother, Clara's daughter, refused, said the past was better buried, said the fire was a sign to let go. I didn't know they kept it all, that it was still here." Her voice cracked. "I would have come sooner. I just didn't know there was anything left." Evelyn gently reached out, placed a hand on her shoulder. "She waited for you. All of this, it waited for someone who loved her enough to remember." They sat together for hours. Madeline read the journal aloud, her voice breaking over certain passages. Evelyn brought down tea. No one spoke of money, or value, or antiques. Only memory. Only heart. At one point, Madeline picked up a small framed photo of Clara and her husband, Jonathan. "My grandfather died in that chair," she said, pointing to the worn velvet seat still tucked in the corner. She held his hand until the end. She never loved another. Evelyn swallowed hard. It felt too familiar. "I know what that kind of love feels like," she whispered. "I lost my husband 2 years ago." Madeline nodded, eyes full of knowing. "And yet here you are," she said, "breathing life into another woman's heartbreak. You didn't just save this house. You resurrected a legacy." They cried together, strangers bound by grief, and something greater. Before leaving, Madeline opened her purse and pulled out a small jewelry box. This was Clara's. She said, "She gave it to me when I turned 16. I'd like you to have it." Evelyn opened it. Inside was a delicate gold locket. "Are you sure?" she asked, voice trembling. Madeline nodded. I think she'd want the woman who saved her soul to carry it forward. That night, Evelyn stood in the parlor, alone. She looked up at the restored chandelier, the golden light now dancing across the walls like fireflies. In her hand, the locket rested warm from her skin. Mason's photo sat on the mantel. She looked at it now, no longer through tears of pain but of promise. "I'm still here, love," she whispered. "And I'm finally becoming who you always saw in me." 1 year to the day after Evelyn Carter bought the burned-down Hamilton mansion, she stood at its front steps, dressed in a simple navy dress, the gold locket from Clara around her neck. It was no longer just that charred house outside Charleston. It was now a registered historical site, a living museum, a place that told not just Clara's story, but Evelyn's too. Dozens of people gathered on the lawn that morning for the opening ceremony of the Voices Remembered exhibit, curated by the Historical Society in partnership with Evelyn herself. Neighbors, local press, distant relatives of Clara Hamilton, and even young families who'd followed Evelyn's restoration journey online all came to witness the rebirth of what was once forgotten. Inside, the once ruined ballroom now gleamed, polished floors, restored windows, sunlight pouring in. On the walls, photographs of Clara and her family hung beside Evelyn's journal entries and restoration photos. Display cases held Clara's letters, war medals, and poetry. A small plaque near the staircase read, "This home was resurrected by Evelyn Carter, widow, mother, builder of second chances." Evelyn didn't hear that part being read. She was standing in the kitchen, staring out the window, clutching a letter she'd written but never sent to Mason. She'd been writing to him in her journal for months, letters he'd never read, but that she needed to say. "Today," she whispered the final one aloud. "Dear Mason, I kept my promise. I didn't just survive. I found a reason to live again. I thought I was done after you left just a broken woman trying to feed 2 kids. But then this house called me. And through its walls, I met a woman named Clara, who had also loved deeply and lost painfully. We rebuilt each other, she and I. And now, I feel you here. Not in the past, but in every nail I hammered, every wall I patched, every moment I stood back and said, I did this. You'd be proud of me. And I finally believe it, too." She folded the letter and tucked it into the locket. That's when she felt a warm hand slide into hers. Ryan, now taller than her, stronger in frame but still her boy. In the other hand, he held a small bouquet of wild flowers. "Layla picked these," he said, his voice soft. "Said Clara would have liked them." Evelyn smiled, eyes misty. She would have. Layla came bounding in a moment later, her cheeks flushed with excitement. "Mom, there's a line of people waiting to buy your book in the front parlor." "What book?" Evelyn blinked. Layla grinned, lifting her phone. "Your book. The one Ava helped you publish, The House That Waited. We've sold 47 copies today, and it's only noon." Evelyn laughed through the tears. She had written it as a personal project, part memoir, part tribute to Clara. She never imagined anyone would read it beyond her children. But word had spread. People were drawn to the story, not just for the restoration, but for the healing inside it. As the sun reached its highest point, Ava Monroe took the stage on the front porch, tapping the mic gently. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, We are here today not just to reopen a house, but to honor what can happen when one woman refuses to give up on her family, on history, or on herself. She turned to Evelyn, gesturing for her to join her. Evelyn walked forward slowly, heart pounding. But as the crowd clapped, her nerves gave way to something else. Gratitude. A deep, soul-level knowing that everything, every awful, beautiful, uncertain moment had led to this. She took the microphone, looked at the sea of faces, and said, "1 year ago, I stood in this house with nothing but $10,000 and a broken heart. I didn't know how to fix a roof. I didn't know what was buried beneath the floorboards. I didn't even know if my family would make it another month. But I knew one thing: I wasn't ready to give up. And sometimes, that's all it takes. One choice to keep going. One risk, no matter how foolish it seems. This house saved me, and I believe, with all my heart, that it waited for me just like I waited to become who I was meant to be." Silence fell. Then applause. Not the polite kind, but the kind that rises from people who feel changed. That night, after the crowds had gone home and the lights in the exhibit dimmed, Evelyn sat alone in the ballroom, once scorched black, now glowing gold. She placed her hand on the floorboards and whispered, "Thank you, Clara." Then she walked outside, into the moonlight, where the stars blinked above like old friends. Somewhere far away. She imagined Mason smiling, and somewhere deeper, inside her chest, she felt peace finally blooming where sorrow once lived. Sometimes the most beautiful beginnings are hidden inside the ugliest endings. Evelyn didn't set out to change her life. She simply refused to let it crumble. In the middle of grief, fear, and financial ruin, she made one bold choice to believe there was still something worth saving. And from a burned-down house, she found not just Clara's forgotten legacy, but her own strength, too. This story isn't about luck. It's about courage, the kind that whispers, "Try one more time," when the world tells you to give up, the kind that picks up a hammer with trembling hands and says, "Maybe I can rebuild." Through soot and silence, Evelyn discovered a truth. Sometimes what feels like the end is just an invitation to begin again, this time, as the person you were always meant to become. The end. Up next, 2 more true stories of hope rising from the ashes. Click to keep watching and hit subscribe if you believe no life is ever too lost to rebuild.